Let's talk about gag orders, as the Idaho versus the accused Bryan Kohberger court issued a second gag order, and we are going to compare the concept of gag orders in the UK. And hopefully, by the end of this video, you will understand the importance of gag orders. So let's get started. If you're not familiar with this case in America, let me play a short clip from the Law and Crime Network. You can see the full clip in the description area below.
Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were stabbed to death in their off-campus home. More than a month later, Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. He'd been attending Washington State University pursuing a PhD in criminology. He was extradited back to Idaho and now faces murder charges.
When most people think of a gag order, we think of court cases dealing with the rich and the famous. But did you know anyone could apply for one? Though it is hard to tell how many are ordered by the court, because in the UK, gag orders are also known as disclosure orders, and those would be for businesses to restrict sensitive information from being made public. Interim injunction orders are during the proceedings hearing stage before the actual trial has started, and these types may be listed as directions by the court, very much like the gag order issued that we're talking about in this case in Idaho. Non-molestation orders are used in the family court, similar to a restraining order in North America. And super injunction orders, these would be to prevent media from publishing certain information. So plaintiffs or defendants can apply for them, and it is up to the court to decide if they are relevant or in the public interest. They can also be made by a court to restrict the publication and dissemination of private and confidential information, which we'll hear more about later on. What do you think in relation to pending trials is the controversy? Well, for years, the questions on everyone's mind is, are gagging orders unconstitutional and in contrast of freedom of speech? Though freedom of speech is not an absolute right, for example, hate speech could be a chargeable offense. So I've assisted many victims to obtain a non-molestation order. As mentioned, they are known as restraining orders in North America. And here in the UK, 9 times out of 10, in my experience, the court instructs all parties that the details of the order are to remain private and not shared with anyone in the public. And what you may not know is a non-molestation order would not appear on a basic standard DBS, which is a disclosure and barring service check for a person's criminal history background. However, it will come up on an enhanced DBS check, as the police will be aware of it, because it's standard procedure that all non-molestation orders are sent to the police. What do you think the main objectives are in a pending trial? Well, the defendant obviously wants to be treated fairly. The victim has an interest, as they want to have confidence in the judicial system. So they want the accused to be punished appropriately for the crime and for justice to be restored. And for a fair trial to take place, overriding rights such as freedom of speech may have to be prohibited in order to balance both parties' right to a fair trial. So if you've been following the case against the accused Bryan Kohberger, the big news is that the court issued a second gag order on the 18th of January 2023, which prohibits investigators, law enforcement personnel, and any interested party in the case, including all attorneys and victims' families, from releasing any statements which a reasonable person would expect to be disseminated by means of public communications that relates to, and I'll just read a few. You can read the full order as I've left it in the description area. So the order prohibits statements regarding evidence, character, credibility, reputation, or criminal record of a party, victim, or witness, any opinion as to the merits of the case. This second extended gag order has many people upset who are most likely supporters of freedom of speech and most likely believe that the gag order has gone too far. Let's hear from Crime Time with DutyRon, who is a retired New York law enforcement officer, and Ed Wallace, who is a CSI expert that trains law enforcement worldwide. Let's see what they have to say. As always, the full videos are linked in the description area.
People magazine pushed interviews with the Greek restaurant folks to talk about Kohberger going in there. The DMs that were released from the Instagram account, they might all have an influence on the judge's decision to further this gag order. Because remember, the judge and the prosecutor, they want justice to be served. They don't want to have the defense have a ground ball to get stuff thrown out. So, you know, gag orders aren't a bad thing. You know, everyone's all pissed off about it. And like, oh, well, that means we can't get in more information. Yeah. Until June, there should be nothing that's going to come out. And anybody that's trying to get stuff out is really not trying to help. I'm sorry. I mean, I know I'm going to get backlash for it, but it is what it is. And that's a fact. It's a fact. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah. You know, in the press, in digging in the internet sleuths and all of the stuff like that, going out there and talking to people and trying to gather this information and then airing it publicly, it could be prejudicial to the end goal of justice here.
Bravo to DutyRon and Ed Wallace. You won't get a backlash from me, as I am a strong believer in justice for victims. And you will understand why when I inform you about the updated guidance from the UK Crown Prosecution Service. In this next clip that I'd like you to listen to, Icked, who is a true crime analyst, is highlighting the perils of those who lie to the media and how it has had a knock-on effect to the Greek restaurant that DutyRon mentioned.
What is up, it's Icked. Welcome back to the channel and thank you for stopping by. Now, there's some really interesting news with regards to Bryan Kohberger and the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow, Idaho. Now, the People magazine recovered it yesterday. They said that they spoke to a former employee and that this employee had seen Kohberger come in at least on 2 occasions, and they stood out to this person because of the specific vegan diet and that he didn't want pots and pans that touched meat to touch his food, which this is all information that has been put out previously as far as like his dietary stuff. And so whoever put this information out with People was just regurgitating information that's been put out. The Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow, Idaho. First of all, I'm glad that they actually addressed this. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I guess there's just people making up stories. The news/media should really do their due diligence before running a story with completely fabricated information. This will be my only response to this story from People. It is not true. This person who wants their 5 minutes of fame has now caused a whole bunch of extra work for myself and the investigators. I also have not forbidden employees from speaking to reporters. We all decided collectively to support the families and to not share anything that could potentially harm the investigation or cause the families more stress, which at a lot of places of employment, you know, the places I've worked, they always say don't talk to me. Like, especially like I used to work at 2 different hospitals. A lot of the times, you know, media would come there. They'd always tell us there's a media person. Don't ever talk to the media. Don't ever put out any information. You could actually get in big trouble for saying anything if you worked at a job and said it.
Good, Mel, thank you for that. To bring it to our attention that the Greek restaurant's message that the media should carry out due diligence. And in the UK, it is generally understood that media reporting, regardless of whether in an objective or prejudiced manner, may induce a trial by media by its potential to influence the jury or witness. It can even cause a chaotic courtroom. To breach a gagging order is enforceable in the UK and would be contempt of court. So let's listen to a bit of what the CPS Prosecution Service had to say in their update. So the CPS, that is the Crown Prosecution Service in the UK, updated their guidance to contempt of court reporting restrictions and restrictions on public access to hearings. And they did this in September 2022. And they explained the two forms of contempt, being criminal and civil, and remind us that disobedience to a procedural order, although it in itself is not a crime, but if it interferes or obstructs with justice or is calculated to prejudice the due administration of justice, then it is a behavior that may require a punishment. You know, when DutyRon said that the judge could have a reason to further this gag order in Idaho, well, I can tell you about a case in the UK where the judge gave a super media gag order after he found out that a defendant's personnel records were leaked to the media. And when he discovered this, he made this super injunction to all media and media platforms to stop immediately, on the ground that it was necessary to do so to avoid a substantial risk of prejudice to the administration of justice and the possibility of the information being researched on the internet. So judges can inject at any time. And the reason for this in the UK is that there is a strict liability publication that applies to active proceedings. One of the reasons also could be when a case is active, there is a risk that could prevent a witness from coming forward, which cannot be known if you think about it. So if there is a breach, it will be considered contempt of court, irrespective of the intent behind the publication. And this contempt is judged at the time of publication. The longer the gap between the publication and the trial is known as the fade factor. However, even if the risk is low, it will still be contempt of court. And if you think about it, DutyRon said it best. Gag orders are a good thing to ensure justice. I could see the defense team for the accused Bryan Kohberger submitting an argument that it is impossible to get a fair trial and request a new hearing venue. And what did you think of Icked message? Didn't he give great advice? Don't talk to the media if you have information on a case. Go to law enforcement. So check out all the links in the description area below and let me know your thoughts.
I hope you found today's video interesting, and information is power. Why not subscribe and watch more of our videos? If you need legal help, contact legal-minded friends.